Tonight, I'd like to recede even further into history to 1838 into Springfield, Illinois. There, an organization in Springfield called the Young Men's Lyceum, which Abraham Lincoln's friend William Herndon once described as a society which contained and commanded all the culture of that place. Sort of like this gathering here this evening, except it didn't have the ladies who were the better half. That month was January, and Lincoln himself was just shy of 29. Violence by supporters of slavery had shattered the state and the nation. Now at the Young Men's Lyceum, Lincoln rose to give an address called The Perpetuation of Our Political Institutions. Not the catchiest of titles, but it defined the very thing that was under threat. It's a long speech, by my reckoning, enough for 12 Al Smith dinners, and there weren't any jokes. But the core of its message can be simply stated. After extolling the wisdom of the founders and of our constitutional system, Lincoln observed great nations crumble for one of two reasons. The first is aggression from the outside, a prospect Lincoln declared that in America's case was inconceivable. As he put it with a flourish of memorable cadences, all the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined with all the treasure of the earth in their military chest, with a Bonaparte for a commander, could not by force take a drink from the Ohio River or make a track over the Blue Ridge Mountains in a trial of 1,000 years. No, Lincoln went on, it was not the foreign aggressor we must fear. It was corrosion from within, the rot, the viciousness, the lassitude, the ignorance. Anarchy is one potential consequence of all this. Another is the rise of an ambitious leader, unfettered by conscience or precedent or decency, who would make himself supreme. If destruction be our lot, Lincoln warned, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. I think often of Abraham Lincoln's Lyceum speech because it embodies both our greatest hopes and our darkest fears. Today, in our own time, we need only look around us. For decades, our political conduct has been woeful and a source of national paralysis. We have supplanted trust and empathy with suspicion and contempt. We have scorched our opponents with language that precludes compromise. We have brushed aside the possibility that the person with whom we disagree might actually sometimes be right. We proclaim what divides us and seldom even acknowledge what unites us. Meanwhile, the roster of urgent national issues have continued to grow, unaddressed and, given the paralysis, impossible to address, and all of this was approaching a level of crisis even before the specter of impeachment arose. This is the moment for an act of remembrance of the core principles we used to know and live by, and that we now seem to have forgotten. We seem to have forgotten that America is not some finished work, nor is it a failed project. Rather, it's an ongoing experiment for which all of us bear responsibility, including a responsibility to repair. We seem to have forgotten that the foundational virtue of democracy is trust, not trust in one's own rectitude or opinion, but trust in the capacity of collective deliberation to move us forward. We seem to have forgotten that cynicism, which has now infected the Western democracies, is not realism for all the weary and knowing errors it affects. Cynicism is just cowardice. It is nothing less than a form of surrender. And finally, we seem to have forgotten, too, the paramount importance of those bonds of affection that Lincoln once spoke of. We need one another more than ever when the chips are down. Historically, we have come together in those moments after the attack on Pearl Harbor, after the 9/11 attack on this very city. The surest path to catastrophe is to ignore our better angels and sever those bonds of affection. As you know, it was my privilege over a period of 4 decades to wear the uniform of the Marines, and I can tell you it's a much more comfortable uniform, the one I'm wearing tonight. But this evening, I would like to also share 2 stories from my time in uniform. One is a reminder of the importance of keeping things in perspective, especially in difficult times. The other, a reminder to see ourselves sometimes as others do, because what they see sometimes doesn't show up in our own mirrors. The first story comes from April of 2004 in Iraq, outside a city where insurgents had taken control. My forces were poised to take it back. The night before the assault, probably around 1 o'clock in the morning, I had spoken to the assault troops as they prepared for battle, and it was now time for generals to get out of the way and leave it to the young men. Afterwards, when one Marine thought I was out of earshot, I heard him ask his squad leader, "Do you think it's going to be tough?" And the squad leader replied in a corporal's vernacular that I won't quote verbatim, but he said, "Hush and get some rest. We took Iwo Jima. Fallujah won't be nothing." I think of those words as I look at the responsibilities that we Americans must shoulder now, shoulder today. We have succeeded against greater odds. We wring our hands about the condition of the country, yet we're not facing the Civil War or the Great Depression. It is hard work to make our democracy work, and indeed our Constitution was designed to make it hard. But hard it might be, it is also noble work, for we're building a country here. And my second story also comes from Iraq. One day we apprehended an insurgent in the act of planting a mine on a major road. In fact, it was a road I'd just driven on. Now a prisoner, bound hand and foot, the Marines brought him to me because they were surprised to find that he spoke English. He and I talked for a bit, and I made clear he was lucky to be alive and that he had an orange jumpsuit in his future. He was, no two ways about it, the enemy, at least when he was doing his day job or his night job. America in his mind was the great Satan. But before he was loaded onto a truck to be taken off to confinement, he said, "General, can I ask you something?" And so I stopped and waited for him. He said, "If I behave myself, if I'm a model prisoner, is there a chance that my family and I can immigrate to America?" Now think about that. I wasn't going to sponsor him, but his words offered a reminder to me. His words reminded me how America is still viewed in the world. Even among those who profess to hate it, America remains a power of inspiration in their lives as well. They see our freedoms and our vitality, our long tradition of democratic government, our chaotic and exuberant culture, and they want in. I often wish that we Americans could see ourselves through foreign eyes. It would remind us of our great good fortune and of the good things that we have in common, the good things we too often take for granted. Would remind us too of the precious deposit of freedom and the faith in our founding principles that have been passed up to now from generation to generation. That is what the 29-year-old Abraham Lincoln wanted to remind his own audience at the Young Men's Lyceum. And he called on his listeners to renew their commitment. He said, "Let every American, every lover of liberty, every well-wisher to his prosperity, swear by the blood of the Revolution never to violate in the least particular the laws of the country and never to tolerate their violation by others." In 1782, in Alexander Hamilton's last letter to his comrade in arms, Lieutenant Colonel John Lawrence, he wrote, "We have fought side by side to make America free. Let us hand in hand struggle to make her happy." Now, Lawrence died in one of the last skirmishes of our long, seemingly endless war for independence, never seeing the happy country for which he gave his life. We owe him a debt, as we owe a debt to all who have fought for liberty, including those who tonight serve in the far corners of our planet, among them the American men and women supporting our Kurdish allies. The phrase, and I would note that the phrase, "all who have fought for liberty," also includes the generations of ordinary citizens who have embodied our national ideals and passed them down. In Springfield, Lincoln invoked biblical language to describe how the power of this common spirit protects our nation. He said, "As truly as has been said of the only greater institution, Your Eminence, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So, ladies and gentlemen, with malice for none and charity for all, let us restore trust in one another. Thank you very much.